This is Chris Detzel, and
I'm Michael Burke.
welcome to Data Hurdles. Let's conquer these hurdles together. All right, welcome to another Data Hurdles. I'm Chris Detzel, and
I'm Michael Burke. How you doing, Chris?
pretty good. How about you?
Good. It's raining out here today in Boston, so a little chillier than it has been for the past few days, but had a great weekend, really relaxing, got time with my family. It was my sister's son's birthday, so we had a bunch of birthday celebrations. Really great weekend. How about yourself?
I'm in Dallas, as I've always said, but it's nice and warm. It's probably going to be 80s today, just like it was yesterday and the day before, etc. So, springtime, this is whenever, right now it's really nice and it's not so hot or cold. We have a really special guest today. His name is Ram Bulusu, and he's at Warp9Ai. And so today's topic will be around AI. Ram, how are you?
Doing great, enjoying my life here in San Francisco.
I'm sure you guys are having nice weather. It's probably chilly at night, no? Morning?
Yeah, I'm fortunate to live about 5 minutes from the beach.
Oh, nice.
I can't complain, except for the occasional earthquake. We have a good time here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Ram, where you're at today, how you got there, and then we'll just kind of dive into the conversation, if that's fair.
Sure, yeah. So by education, I'm a chemical engineer. In the last 35, now 36 years, I've spent almost exclusively in the healthcare industry. That is both in biotech, pharmaceutical, medical device, connected devices, in multiple roles. Basically, my push has been to bring the latest technology into healthcare to serve patients better and towards what you might consider the end of a traditional corporate career. I was asked by a lot of my industry contacts, my former clients, when I was consulting my former employers, to put together an organization that can bring AI, specifically Gen AI, into healthcare and truly realize the potential of it. Also had requests coming in from very different organizations like the US federal government, for instance, to basically take generative AI technology and directly apply it for benefiting people and patients and the federal government and so on. So with their sponsorship and support, we launched Warp9Ai end of last year. And so we're now providing traditional services, that is to develop use cases, implement generative AI solutions across industries, healthcare, federal government, manufacturing, supply chain, and so on. And the other area, this is an interesting one for me because any number of senior executives in the industry have reached out to me and said, can you coach us on AI? Generative AI is a new thing and we want to educate ourselves. And I've also gotten a lot of requests from chief risk officers in global corporations saying, hey, can you help us create a AI governance plan? And so I'm working on that. But my true passion in launching Warp9Ai was to create hardware products for the federal government. I'm working on a proposal to create a Gen AI-enabled smart camera with multimodal feeds that can be used in everything from TSA at airports to traffic cameras to be able to observe who's doing what and issue alerts when, in fact, there's a potential risk coming around the corner. It's very exciting times, and I'm privileged to be doing this work.
Now, Ram, this is really interesting, and I love and truly do believe that the hardware space is where we are going to see so much more acceleration in Gen AI, especially on device, not going to a massive cloud provider, but looking at targeted models of experts to solve specific problems on device. In the area that you're focusing on, in kind of cameras, and it sounds like maybe surveillance to some degree, what are the key pain points that we have that traditional models aren't solving?
So I'm building my hardware set based on a concept called benevolent monitoring, with the premise that if we could observe potential risks before they get realized, we could avoid 90% of fatalities and accidents and bad actors entering our nation, for instance. And so the technology itself is not that hard to develop by creating multimodal feeds, real-time physical feeds into your smart cameras and so on. But the biggest challenge I've been asked to address is around privacy, because the same benevolent continuous monitoring that can help us prevent problems and accidents is also raising a lot of privacy hackles, saying, I know that you can reduce accidents at traffic intersections by 90% if you can observe what people are doing in their cars and so on, send them alerts or something like that. At the same time, people are saying, I don't want people watching me. So
nobody's going to want an alert sent to them. When they're driving, hey, you're looking down. Hey, you're looking at your phone. Stop looking. That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, if you think about what do collision mitigation systems do in your car?
Yeah.
You're drifting lanes on a highway and your steering wheel vibrates and says, hey, wake up, pay attention. So I hear you're saying initially it doesn't sound like it makes sense, but the question is prevention has to be a key. So the challenge, Mike, you're asking about how do you prevent problems? Forewarned is forearmed. So most bad things that happen didn't happen out of the blue. There were multiple steps and indicators that led to that point. We either didn't see them or know them or ignored them. AI can play a massive role in having smart cameras that have real-time physical feeds to alert you to what could go wrong. It's like that old movie, Minority Report, from many years ago, right? Now, it so happens that I went to the school called the Indian Institute of Technology in India many years ago, and lots of the techies in the Bay Area, like Sundar Pichai, Nikesh Arora, all these guys, they were people that I went to school with. Sundar was much younger than me, but Nikesh was my batchmate. And when I talk to them, what they tell me is in the chip manufacturing space, I'm working with a couple of people who are designing chips for NVIDIA. They're giving me some tips on here's what you do. I'm looking at people from, say, Google and Amazon. They're helping me with some of the coding and so on. The interesting thing is the camera technology already exists pretty close to 75% of the space. You got Tesla telling your cars how to recognize a person from a stop sign, how do you stop? You look at Waymo doing some of these things and so on. So the technology does exist, gesture recognition, pattern recognition, things like that. Facial recognition, of course, is already in existence. The question is, rather than investing time in creating a brand new camera, look to NVIDIA, for instance, or TSMC to create some chips that can maybe speed up absorption of data in real time. The challenge also comes in on multimodal inputs. So one example, right? You've seen this whole focus on reducing the federal government size and so on. In the TSA space, we just don't have enough people who are qualified and trained. And when we tested out some of the models using NetRay, which is the product and title that we're working on for the camera, one of the NVIDIA experts told me that the highest accuracy you can get from a camera recognizing a potential bad actor going through TSA is 90%. Will that be enough? I said, are you kidding me? When I talk to the TSA administration leaders, they can barely get 60% efficiency from human observers.
He's great.
We take 90 any day. And if you think about 50 major airports in the country, 50 major international airports, maybe more than that, 100 cameras in each. You take 10 cameras from each place, start with one pilot, and initially this product would work in conjunction to support and supplement the efforts of the TSA authorities. Now you're looking at people coming in, you're scanning their passports. You could potentially, we go through scanners. You could potentially measure the body temperature. Are they getting too worked up? What's happening here? Take a look at the fingerprints, for instance. Look at how they're walking and what the gait looks like. Now that combine that with the latest fingerprint information from your various FBI, CIA databases, things of that nature. And you could get an alert saying, hey, this person has a one-way ticket booked from this particular location that has caused problems for us before. And his or her passport picture is aged, all that. So all these factors coming in, the key is real time, right? If the information comes in 2 months later, too late. So where companies like NVIDIA can help, and to your point, what's the biggest challenge? The chips need to be tuned more for real-time data input. And most camera systems are not necessarily near real-time. Even in Zoom or even in FaceTime, you see a small lag. Now, how do you build for that? How do you buffer for that? So that's the challenge. Now, we could always combine updated procedures. The TSA folks can tell people, just wait and let us scan you for 30 seconds. And then in the meantime, our cameras will catch up. But the opportunity to prevent bad actors from entering the country is extremely high if we can use the generative AI technology with smart cameras along with multimodal inputs. Initially, as a supplement to each of the TSA agents already there. When I did an initial estimate for a proposal, we looked at 50 cameras, one for each airport to pilot international airport. You're talking about $1 million initial install cost with all the wiring and so on to come into the existing cameras, and then about $250,000 to the initial training of the TSA agents. So you got, okay, you're talking about $50-60 million initial investment, but federal government doesn't do anything so small. So what I'm looking at, the proposals coming in are around 10 times that amount. So you're talking about not quite $1 billion, but between $500 million to $1 billion as an initial proposal with a 18-month time frame to create the first fully functioning prototype. Shortly after that, every 3 months we install in a new airport. The challenge is certainly we need to get more real-time chips in place. The energy consumption will be off the charts in airports. So we need to have dedicated energy consumption, potentially using single-block nuclear mini reactors, only used to power the camera systems as a supplement, not to replace the existing cameras, because a lot of cameras also have analog feeds. So chips today can't handle analog feeds. So that's a different challenge altogether. So we have to go all digital.
So Ram, a couple quick questions here, because I think this is super interesting. Casinos in places where they have a lot of risk in losing money have been deploying tactics like this for as long as the technology has been available. How does an airport, and specifically this need for exact real time and empowering with nuclear energy, why such a high stringent criteria compared to what we already have in existence? And I know that casinos manage like heart rate, body temperature, gait, all through AI today with specific models designed just for that.
Yeah, so if you think it comes down to scale, right? The federal government doesn't do anything at small scale. If you look at the airport, my goal, if this truly goes to this logical conclusion in the next 7 to 10 years, is every single public transport facility, train stations, bus stations, cruise boarding centers, and airports, and so on, will have this. So you're talking about a higher volume. So if I go to the federal government and say, we'll use your existing power grid, those grids are already struggling significantly. So as new digital measures are included and introduced, so I think it's very important for us to think ahead of energy. The last thing we need is to deploy a very smart tool and find the energy grid is overloaded. Now this thing is going to crash. That's not going to help anybody. So we have to prepare for the scale now. Casinos are much smaller in number compared to the airports and other transport locations.
Oh, really interesting. And when you think about how a technology like this would be managed, let's say that restrictions aside on energy and technological advancements, say we have a fully real-time deployed at global or national scale AI-powered surveillance system, right? How would something like that be managed by the federal government?
So obviously, the federal government has their own set of standards, whether it's 508 or other cybersecurity standards that comes into play. We need to certainly have a federal data storage cloud, using the term cloud for lack of a better term. We need proprietary, federally controlled data storage modules, either dedicated clouds or sometimes even physical storage locations if needed. We want them to be, interestingly enough, able to be air-gapped at a moment's notice, because the last thing we want is some bad actors hacking into that database, and that's going to create a lot of problems. So it has to be federally controlled. Certainly, I don't expect the federal government to start creating a whole technology division that to handle this, because that's why they reach out to people like me. We can certainly work with people like Karen Dahout, who's now the CEO of Public Sector Cloud for Google, and those sorts of people, and be able to work with the big tech companies to create controlled federal government purpose-built cloud. I think that's the way we would want to handle it.
Really interesting. Yeah, because there's so much today and most of the general public doesn't know this, but there are so many surveillance systems already accessible. So if you have a Ring device, for example, there is a door for the federal government to access that in a subpoena space, which is huge and can be huge. So when we think about all the existing technology that we already have and all the existing surveillance that we already have as a country, how will these cameras differentiate themselves? Is this going to be something that is incredibly high resolution? Is it going to be able to pick up multiple sensors to assess people differently than a traditional camera would? And what does that landscape look like today versus the technology that we have versus the technology we will have in the future?
That's a great question. So there is no need to reinvent the wheel, right? Like I said earlier, the gesture recognition piece is already in place. We've already got x-rays that we go through. The technology is available in different areas. It so happens, whatever the historical reason is, that the government tends to be behind in technology compared to other, like casinos. Like you said, they're much more advanced. Private enterprises have the opportunity to drive at the sharp edge of technology much faster than government enterprises. One, because of various regulations, another because of perhaps not the best and brightest technology people working in tech. So the way I see it is not creating everything from scratch, but take what you have today and build to the next step. So really to have an interconnected system of cameras across all of our international airports that can draw on the latest information that is in siloed databases within FBI or CIA or Department of Homeland Security, pull it together in real time, that's really going to be where we can make a massive difference. Do the individual components of technology exist? Yes, we have smart cameras. Okay, sure, why not? Our iPhones look at our face and recognize who we are to let us log in. But to bring together the existing technologies under a federally controlled umbrella at scale with very low probability of failure, that's really the game changer.
Yeah, that's super interesting. This is a pretty large scale dynamic problem to solve. What brought you to this through your career, and how did you get to this problem specifically as something of interest?
I've always, perhaps it's my upbringing, right? I grew up poor, so to speak, in the third world. And as I grew up and by God's grace got some good success, I started realizing that in any enterprise, whether a personal life or a federal government enterprise or a private enterprise, there is no limit to how low things can go. And so I said, okay. But then I said, when a bad thing happens, I'm in healthcare. We make medicines sometimes that kill patients. Unfortunately, that's not our intent that happen. Or sometimes we have contamination in a product. Or I see accidents that happen. Or we see bad actors coming in, as happened in 9/11 and so on. So each of these negative outcomes didn't happen in isolation. There were multiple, 10, 20, 100 different data points that, had they been looked at, could have told us this was coming, and we may be able to prevent it. So the focus to me has been on how do you prevent risks from materializing? And to do that, the first thing you have to do is be able to identify risks, which means you have to define what kind of risk you're looking for. So prevention to me is an extremely important aspect of almost all parts of our life. And I think that's really what permeates my approach in almost everything I do. When I implemented data historian tools on manufacturing floors for my healthcare employers and customers, it's because the data historian will tell you in milliseconds if your pH is going to be too high. Is it a trend alarm? Your batch is okay. The thickness of your filament is okay now, but it's increasing by 0.01 microns per batch. In 10 batches, you'll be out of spec. By bringing those types of look-ahead type of technologies, identifying what could happen and preventing it, that's been a game changer in every role that I've been. And it's a natural conclusion to say, okay, I'm in healthcare. How do I take this and apply it across the larger industries? That's the risk prevention piece. That mindset is what's really helped me come to this point.
That's so interesting. And I think that there is still so much opportunity when we talk about data quality and governance and the next degree of unification of data, especially at places like the federal government. How do you see that taking place? There are so many regulatory bodies. There is so much politics to get through to get something like this approved. I think that we see this with so many different technologies out there today, self-driving cars, security and governance and compliance. What are the steps to not only get to a system like this, but sway all these different political organizations that you would need to go through and convince them that this is the best practice moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And I find that in any enterprise, especially the one like the federal government, you're always going to have multiple obstacles and hurdles to get through. What I found is that if your goal is benevolent, if your goal is to protect the country, protect our people, that it makes it that much easier to get through these hurdles. Because no matter which political affiliation or bureaucratic issues we deal with, almost everybody will agree, or everybody should agree, that, hey, we want to protect the country, keep our people safe, and that sort of thing. And that mindset is important. Then comes, we've agreed on what to do. We want to protect the country. How do you do it becomes more of an objective level list of bullet points, right? You say, okay, we need to deal with three types of things here. We need to deal with the people aspect, we need to deal with the process aspect, we need to deal with the technology aspect. Technology aspect is the easiest because it's in bytes, you've got technology, pull it together. The people aspect is where people say, why should I support this? Why should I give you this budget? So you've always got to look at return on investment, which is for any generative AI use case, any technology use case. We say, okay, right now we have, so let's say 275,000 TSA inspectors, and here's what they're getting paid, and here's the rate of success, and here's the stress they're under, or the FAA, and so on. And you say, by deploying this technology, it's going to reduce the workload of these folks, potentially help us cut some headcounts. You're going to create higher levels of accuracy from 60 to 90% of filtration of people, bad actors coming in. Okay, but I say that sounds like a good business case. The next step then comes in, how about the process part of it? AI governance or data governance becomes a big aspect, like I said earlier, around privacy and so on. Like you said earlier, we don't really have the privacy we think we do because everything we do is already observed. You walk through an airport with a barcode on your printed or electronic ticket. It's being monitored every gate that you go through. To me, unless you've got something to hide, I have no problem. You can watch everything I do. So typically the people who might protest having the privacy exposed, do they have something to hide, or what is the problem? Or what is it? Why don't you want people to know what you're doing? So the AI governance piece is extremely important. But if you say, for instance, I came to the US in 1989, eventually became an American citizen in 99, every single aspect of my life was scrutinized to get through all the hurdles to get to that point. Fingerprints, retinas, where I live, what I ate for lunch, or was it later a credit card bill, 25, whatever the case may be. Right? What gives me confidence is the federal government, if you work closely with them, they have the ability to put structure around preventing the data from being available to bad actors. So your governance process has to include a wall around your data, which is why I said earlier, right? You've got to have a dedicated federal government cloud storage type of a solution, which can be accessed by anybody outside the federal government. So the process needs to be taken care of. I like to say, even to my colleagues in healthcare, always that one man's procedure is another man's bureaucracy. Because you can say, why do we have, for instance, why do I need to go through all these steps just to get a driver's license? Because you don't want to run around mowing people down accidentally. You want to make sure you're competent. Why do you need to go through the 200 tests to get into this master's program? Because we want to ensure that you have the right kind of skills. So there is some bureaucracy, but I've learned over the years not to push back on bureaucracy saying, why do we need this? Instead, say, how can I navigate this? Because the people who put the bureaucracy in place, they're not idiots. They're smart people. There's a reason they put that in place, right? Just like we have cybersecurity and so on. So the process has to be taken care of in a very structured manner. And I work with the federal government, including the Food and Drug Administration in my industry many times. You can't fight them. You have to understand why they put it in place. And as I work with the federal government, what I find is they're very dedicated people. They're not in it to make a fortune. Their only goal is how do we help our country? You may differ with them on how they approach it, but their intent is clear. And so understand their process, and a governance program around it that specifically addresses those steps. What I've also found is when you listen to people from very different backgrounds who challenge you significantly on your thinking, that actually makes your product better. And that's something I've learned over the years, that here's what I'm thinking of doing. And I always go to people who typically disagree with me in every single board meeting. And I find I learn a lot from them because they have a very different way of thinking. So open yourself up to scrutiny from the federal government auditors, create a AI governance program. And in fact, there's a model we have created called Goldilocks AI, just to say, hey, this is just enough for everyone. And you have to make some compromises along the way and be able to roll this product out. So that's the process part. So the leadership piece is really around understanding where everybody's coming from, what their motivations are, setting goals. Process is about creating a governance program that fits into the existing governance framework. And then the technology piece, I find it to be the easiest one. Once you get past the process hurdle, then it becomes a show me point. Okay, show me how your tool actually works.
So interesting. By the way, this conversation has taken a turn for completely different than what I thought, but very intriguing. Thanks, Mike, for that. I'm a little, I would say, lost. I've been listening to this, and I feel like what is going to be accomplished with this new AI technology within this camera or recording? I guess I'm not like, I feel like anywhere I go, I'm being recorded no matter what, whether it's somebody's doorbell, somebody's gas station has cameras, airport has cameras, freaking everywhere. You can't go without being video and recorded. And the other thing is that, not to completely get off here, I've read to where like the Chinese government has things like this, and they actually score their people on certain areas and certain things that say the government has good intentions. Do they? Maybe to some degree there's some good intentions and the technology can help them in some ways, but once you build that, it's open to do whatever they want. So I don't know if what my question is, but I think it's more about what are we trying to accomplish with this? What is it that it's going to do much better at than what we have today? I guess I'm just not 100% getting it. I understand that the government wants to buy this and potentially buy it or do more stuff with AI. We talk more about how AI can do more stuff. You got the thing to where if you're at a stoplight, and you get these indicators around, hey, you're doing these things, don't do these things, or you might get a wreck or something like that or whatever. It's fair. I just don't really see that's that helpful, but I don't know, maybe you can put it in perspective for me a little bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. So for first, what you talked about, the example of the Chinese government, right? Like I said earlier, it always comes down to what your ultimate goal is. If your goal is altruistic to help people, then technology can help. I'm not a geopolitical expert by any stretch. It's very possible that in the case of this particular Chinese government thing you mentioned, I don't know that they necessarily want to help people. Maybe it was more driven by control. I can't speak for that. The US is a country that wants to empower people, right? We want enabling and empowering technology. So we want to help us live better, healthier lives. To give an example, in my last few jobs, I work with Abbott Laboratories and Detzel, the companies that created this diabetes monitoring technology, a little chip that you wear on your shoulder that measures your glucose level, etc. Now, your healthcare provider can see that, your insurance provider can see that. Nobody's complaining about the privacy loss because they're saying, yeah, this is keeping me safe because when I eat a donut, I know my sugar level goes up and I take my insulin, etc. So if the purpose of your technology is to help empower and enable people to live lives to their fullest and extend their lifespans and be safe and be protected from threats, then everything else falls in place. If the intent, however, is to say we want to control and restrict, then that's exactly the outcome you're going to get. You're going to get restriction, control, and taken away of your freedom. So that's the whole concept is benevolent monitoring. We are providing monitoring with the idea that it can help you. Now, what specifically can this particular camera system do? More than 90% of traffic fatalities can be avoided if we were able to leverage real-time information ahead of the crash, which means you have to monitor 24/7. I'll give you one very horrendous example. Colorado, where I used to live many years ago, there was a young lady that was paralyzed for life because she and her mom were driving in their car, just minding their own business. They went under a bridge and a couple of teenage miscreants who had nothing better to do took a rock and threw it down at passing cars. And in this particular case, the rock broke through the windshield and horribly changed the lives of these people forever. Now, if there were cameras monitoring, they would say, why are these kids hanging out on top of the bridge, hanging by the edge? Why are they picking up a small pile of rocks, keeping it next to them? Something as simple as that, right? If you think of the people who were victimized by that, even the teenagers were like, we were just trying to have some fun. We were playing some pranks. We destroyed somebody's life, and you destroyed your life because you're now in prison for the rest of your life. So risks that occur, driving should be a simple activity. You get in your car, you put on your music, and you go to your work or to a park or whatever, but you should have to worry about, will I die will I come back in one piece? In Sanofi, my most recent employee, we had a saying that the goal of the safety department is to get everyone home safely every day, everywhere. It's a noble goal. And to that end, they put in monitoring cameras, things like that. Okay, that's fine because you're keeping us safe. So if the goal is to help and empower people and protect people, the outcome will be exactly that. The kind of questions you're asking, Chris, are very enlightening because that's the kind of questions people are already asking me, saying, hey, what do you mean monitoring? What are you going to look at? Well, it's benevolent monitoring. And again, the US is built on innovation, freedom, helping every single human being go to their maximum potential, to their ability, to their desire. That's what this country is all about. We may have bad actors coming into our country. Just think of the 9/11 example. Even this day, the gate agent says, when I saw these people, they had this very murderous look on their face when they were coming in. They had a one-way ticket. And I wish I could do something about it, because these individuals were not empowered to say, hey, stop, come over here. We want to check your background. Feeds that need to go into this camera system. Remember, the camera system is just technology. It has to be part of an overall benevolent monitoring ecosystem. We have to empower people to ask questions. Hey, I'm getting a few flags on this. If I say, I don't like your face, I need to examine you, that could be taken as offensive. If I say, my system is telling me that you are being subject to secondary and tertiary checks, that becomes a standard process applied to everybody. It's uniform, it's fair, and the purpose of it is to empower people to be safer. I have no problem going to this camera system if it means a bad actor can be prevented from coming in there.
All right. So I think I'm getting it. So let me make sure. So somebody comes into the airport and this camera looks at my face. It says, oh, this is Chris Detzel. He's a community manager at ZoomInfo. He does this, he does that. And this is his background. He is not suspicious. Let him go. Kind of stuff. Is that kind of what we're thinking or saying in a way?
It is not so much he's not suspicious, let him go. It's more like, is there any reason for us to further examine this person? Is his passport picture not matching his current face? Too far away? Is the barcode on his passport not scanning properly? Or has he been to these locations, Area 11 or wherever it may be, in the last 6 months? What did you do there? Are there any open course warrants and things like that on the person? And then the other aspects around, is this person looking intoxicated? Is this person okay or healthy? Is his or her gait not normal?
And if you're drunk, I don't think that's a big deal necessarily. No.
What if you're driving though?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Here's
That's
a question for you. And I think that this is the really interesting piece that, at least myself and data practitioners, the piece that always keeps me up at night, right? With these amazing technologies that we have that are helping us live a more secure, safe life. The question that I always ask is, it's great in this specific use case that my data is being obtained from all over, all these microsystems and signals, thousands of signals. It's not just these basic examples. It could be things in my life from the past year that system might be analyzing to make an informed decision on whether or not to further investigate me. But the question that I have is, it is incredibly powerful in an isolated use case to create value. The risk I see in the trade-off is always, what else could that data be used for? And that's the piece that I always question as somebody who is a data practitioner. You've seen this in so many places. In the medical space, data being sometimes sold back to insurance companies, or in every circumstance, there is, I feel like, a counterweight of other intentions that data can be repurposed for. How would we maintain security and make sure that this incredible technology is being used for the right purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the purpose of benevolent monitoring is to provide a shield to protect us and not a weapon to be wielded in a negative fashion. I'm a big fan of the Marvel comic universe. And what is it that Tony Stark said? If you had let me implement my shield around the Earth, we would not have had this incursion. And people say, hey, we're giving up our freedoms. Really, that's the whole point of it being benevolent monitoring, is about providing a shield to protect our people from bad things happening. We talked a little bit about 9 out of 10 workplace accidents could be prevented if you had an early alert. 9 out of 10 traffic accidents could be prevented if you had an early alert. 90% of physical security breaches could be prevented if you had real-time active monitoring. But the most interesting part for me is more than 90% of crimes could be solved if you could accurately recall events that led to that crime. How many parents have lost their children to somebody who killed them or butchered them, and we don't know who did what because we have no idea what happened? When in fact, if we have monitoring, we should be able to recollect that. And criminals can no longer get away with committing crimes. You might even make the case that people would not do really horrible things if they knew they were being observed. So yes, it's a double-edged sword. Shield can also be used as a weapon, as Captain America has often proven, to use a Marvel reference. But the benevolent monitoring concept is really to be a shield. That's the whole. Now, this is just one of the products my team is working on. If you're interested,
Man.
There are other products that are in many ways far more exciting. One particular product we're looking at that really helps in manners that most everybody needs is an AI-enabled interactive psychotherapist, e-therapy we're calling it. The reason I put this together was as we went through the pandemic, a lot of young teenage kids who were my daughter's friends, they went through a lot of mental problems. Active kids who are playing basketball locked them in a house for a year. It's not going to work very well. And the biggest challenge we found not only was not getting health coverage for these various psychotherapy issues that they needed, but also there just weren't enough of these therapists available who knew how to handle these types of new problems. And so what eTherapy is looking to do is really create an avatar essentially on your iPhone through your insurance provider and say, you should be able to talk to the person. So many young children teenagers have attempted suicide during the pandemic. It was horrible. I'm like, vibrant young people, they didn't have anyone to reach out to. You call your doctor's office, like, call us in 2 weeks from now, we'll give you an appointment at 8 o'clock and so forth. No, I need an instant answer. So just like the old suicide hotlines and things used to be there, now you can tap an app on your phone, it pops up and says, how can I help you? And if it senses from your behavior and your verbal cues that you're about to maybe do something desperate or self-harm, then it should be able to say, hey, wait a second, don't do such and such. And then in the background alert, say 911 or something like that. That I think is closer to my heart because I've seen several of my daughter's friends go through this and I couldn't believe it. Vibrant young people, my God, why on earth would you want to end your life? Because the timeliness of the response was not there, not to mention all the trauma that there should be around even saying that you have some mental issues, which these days, if you break your leg at work and go in a cast, everyone gives you a get well card. But if you're broken inside, they look at you like something's wrong with you. No one's going to give you flowers saying feel better soon. And so this is an example where you can have a very private interaction, devoid of any prying eye.
It's private until they call the police.
Well, but
No,
to be fair, if you have a symptom that you're displaying, talking about self-harm and so forth, and your app can see you, it is your best interest for them to call it or to say, please stop this person from doing such and such. Again, remember that this is a shield, not a weapon, right?
I am fascinated by all the products that you've mentioned so far that your team is working on.
Me too.
Because I think that they are prying away at the layers of decision-making power that we are going to be arming AI in the coming years, and maybe even sooner than that. How do you think about control and governance in scenarios like this? I think that they are incredibly powerful, but I'm just imagining too, like a false positive, right? On one of these apps where somebody's having a hard day and the signals get mixed up and the police are called. And also just from an ethical standpoint, how much should we enable AI to make these decisions? And I know that you have a very strong opinion on this, and I'm really interested to hear more about that.
So if you think about how to leverage generative AI or AI in general, any profession, any medical, dental, teaching, what have you, any profession, the professional is going to follow a certain set of guidelines and decision paths to make their decisions and diagnoses. An AI tool is not sentient, as many might say. It's really about taking the decision path and building it into an algorithm and providing some safety nets along the way. Just as your doctor says, I went to my doctor a few months ago and he said, oh my gosh, your blood pressure is 190. What's going on? I said, well, I came rushing in because I thought I have to go to the emergency room. He said, no, you look fine. Nothing wrong with you. What have you been doing? Oh, I was up all night, drank about 35 ounces of strong coffee. So you need to calm down. So my point is, even if a symptom looks extreme, a professional will always do a check and balance. Or he'll take your blood pressure and say, oh, let me take it again. If you find a completely off-the-wall symptom coming out, then any professional will say, let's double check this. And that's exactly what these tools are going to do as well. We want to take that double check component of a professional's thinking decision chart, build that into our AI algorithms. It's not going to be a ones and zeros single point decision, right? Most big decisions are not single point decisions. So the other part around, calling a 911 or something, that would be more around better safe than sorry. And privacy is always going to be a part of this. Privacy is always going to be a part of this.
Better safe than sorry, and I'll never use that app again. If I was that kid. You know what I mean? No, but look, I agree with that. And what's interesting to me is how cool it is. The things that you're doing is really intriguing, but it also sets off alarms to me. I just want to start, oh my God, what about this? And so it's a very intimate, passionate kind of conversation to me for whatever reason, because of the things you're saying. So do they think about this? Or do they think about that? It's not that I'm against what you're doing or, it's coming and we've got to be ready for some of this. And kind of what Mike said earlier was like, just because we can do it, should we do it? Some of it, exactly.
What you said there caught my attention, right? It's coming anyway, right? So for whatever reason, anytime a new technology comes in, bad actors seem to have a knack for exploiting that before good actors do. If we don't get ahead of this and create a benevolent monitoring process, you're going to have bad actors coming in and doing invasive monitoring for their own ends. If you look at healthcare, you've got your payers, you've got your providers, you've got your producers like pharma, biotech, you've got the contract manufacturers and so on. It so happens that the payers are the first to get to AI. And so they've been using United Healthcare was the first to use AI supposedly to perform faster processing of claims. Unfortunately, in their case, whatever their intention was, they ended up rejecting more claims. And we saw the horrible outcome of the CEO who was unfortunately...
I remember that. Yeah. Early adopters, maybe not, shouldn't have done it so early. Should have just tested it.
I'm not so worried about the early adoption. It really comes down to understanding that this is the most powerful technology we've had. And it's a matter of time, maybe a few decades before it starts to get a little smarter than us. And because what is exciting is
that about that, maybe a decade at the most.
AI has been around for 50 years. I was AI and ML from Salesforce, Einstein, and so on, even as far back as 10 years ago. Generative AI is new because the way the generative AI algorithms are designed, from what I see, I work with the guys in Google and Microsoft AI and life sciences and all these things. And these are extremely powerful algorithms, the likes of which the world has not seen yet. And their ability to learn and get smarter is faster than anything else I've ever seen. So it is a matter of time before they start getting super smart. And it is better for us to get a handle on how can we leverage this technology, right? It's lightning in a bottle. So we need to be able to take control of that. We talked about what you might call invasive monitoring and things. There is one cool product we're working on, which is called Anchor AI. So many times reporters having to go to deadly parts of the world and hurricanes and tornadoes and war-torn areas, and they're under danger. Many times people just don't go to those areas, so you don't know what's happening there. What exactly happened in this particular battle? This terrorist, what did they do? And so on. We're working on, this is a later product, we're working on a 3D hologram projection that can actually be a telepresence avatar that we can send to dangerous parts of the world to literally see what's happening over there and interact as a 3D hologram with the people there. I don't know if you guys watched Doctor Who a long time ago, the Doctor Who episode about a 3D nurse that comes in, the siren and so on. It was brilliantly done. So that's
what stuff is Jetsons, like back in the day. You can just do all kinds of different cool things. Yeah, I love that. I love that product. That's pretty cool.
Again, the goal behind it is how do I protect people from going into hurricane areas and getting blown away when all they're trying to do is report on what's happening? Let's use a 3D telepresence avatar. So it's exciting. We've got multiple products that are coming up.
You can see it as my wife. She's out and let's say she's traveling to Boston. I stay here and she comes up and there's a hologram all of a sudden in my house. What are you doing, Chris? I was like, uh-oh, not that.
I'll leave you with one more quick question because I think this is an important one. We have, as people, so many ways that we ingest information, right? Sensory, touch, taste, intuition, if you want to consider that something else, based on our experiences. I see large language models and agentic AI today as a incredibly intelligent reference data of the world, and maybe some video and audio repositories as well. But when we talk about sensory data and experience, there is so much more in the biochemical space of how we learn and how we make decisions and judgment calls. How much of that are we missing to really get to a true AI that can act and interact with the rest of the world and learn the way that we do? And is that necessary moving forward to really accomplish a lot of these tasks with the same accuracy as a professional?
Yeah, at the end of the day, our brains they run on chemicals. The brain is nothing more than a fantastic processor, super fast processor. So whether we call it intuition or what have you, to me, it really comes down to the decision path that's running in our brain. Just like a child learns not to touch a hot stove because it burned in the last time he did it. Those experiences are stored. So that's where the value of generative AI becomes more important because it's a learning tool. Typically, generative AI makes mistakes, but not the same mistake twice. And so, yes, you can say intuition and all these other things. We call our decision paths intuition when we can't find a data flowchart we can make out of it because it's beyond our understanding today. But I refuse to believe that any decision we make is not going through a structured algorithm in our brain. Maybe we don't understand how the algorithm works. And the other day, one of my friend's daughters was saying, I feel very depressed. Oh my God. And she talked to doctors, no, you need this Prozac pill. I'm like, are you kidding me? Here's some fresh yogurt, eat it. Here's some coconut water with potassium, drink it. Go stand in the sun outside. She felt fantastic. Your brain runs on sodium, potassium, sunlight, melatonin, and calcium. You take away these things, feel depressed and miserable. And so the brain wants chemicals. What are drugs? Drugs are just chemicals, right? There's nothing more than that. All they're going to do is readjust your brain to say, hey, here's the right chemical balance that you need. Any decision path the brain can follow can be replicated in AI, but we're very far away. We are not even in beta version of Gen AI right now. We're in discovery phase right now. 7 to 10 years from now, Absolutely. You're going to have people using electronic therapists, the reporters not having to go to war-torn areas, no longer any questions about what happens when you go to the airport and who's coming in and who's not.
Excellent. This is incredibly interesting conversation. I really appreciate the time. I think we went to a lot of really fun avenues. Chris, I don't know if you have any wrap-up questions, but thank you so much. This was a real pleasure for me. Really enjoyed having you on the show, and we'd love to have you back sometime.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. You guys asked some fantastic questions, and I need people like you to keep us on our toes to make sure that we don't go in the wrong direction.
Ram, this has been great. No additional questions for me, but thank you for coming. So thank you for coming to another Data Hurdles, and thank you for our audience for tuning in. Please rate and review us. Ram, thanks again for having us. Take care.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.